Hi, and welcome to this video that's going to be about the very basics of doing analog synthesis. Analog being where you've got actual circuits as opposed to software making the noise. That's really what that boils down to. I'm using the Tangible Waves AE Modular because I think it's really graphic in terms of showing you what you're actually joining up. And this video is going to very much focus on these three modules here. So this is the VCO, voltage controlled oscillator, the VCF, voltage control filter, and VCA, voltage control amplifier. And I'm going to start with, I'm going to start very basic. You see there's no wires in. You can also see that it doesn't seem to be laid out very well. That's because I'm in the middle of rearranging my system, and it was a good time to do this video, so I've just popped these into a case. They're not screwed down like they should be, so they will move about while I'm trying to do this, which is a bit of a nuisance and isn't the best demonstration of the AE modular, but yeah, it'll work for these purposes. So very much going to focus on these three. So the very first thing is obviously we get no noise at all. I have got this wire here is going out to my speakers, my studio system, and then this wire here is the MIDI in. And what the MIDI is doing, and one of the things I love about the AE modular, is on the wires that run behind, you can just see on this one here, you can just see the wire that goes behind. So you've got the power that all the system needs, but you've also got MIDI available, or on a channel of MIDI, you've got the clock, and you've got the gate and start-stop for any drum machines and so on and things like that. The ones that we're going to use in this video are the CV, so that we know, so the oscillator knows what pitch to go to, or how to alter the pitch, I should say, as you play the keyboard, and the gate, so that the sound knows to go on and off. Okay, but at the moment, as I say, we've got no sound at all. So just to prove that we've got noise, well, I'm going to hold it with the other hand. So this is a sawtooth coming out of the oscillator. Should be in the right one. I'll be all right. There we go. Okay. So, and that's all that's going to do. So an oscillator makes a noise all the time. But on the front here, you've got frequency. Oh no, sorry, this one's the frequency. And you've got fine frequency, which is useful if you're getting close but not quite there, because it's very sensitive to the coarse one. The other ones we'll come back to in a moment. So that's sawtooth, which is really good for bass and things, because it's got lots of harmonics. There's lots of noise there to play with. Then you've got triangle wave, which will be quite quiet. I'll turn it up a bit. And then you've got, I'll turn it back down again, and then you've got square wave. And oh, that's not making any noise. Oh, that was quite straight into it. So a square wave is where you just alternate. The reason it's called a square wave, a bit like the others are called sawtooth and triangle, is what it looks like if you put it on an oscilloscope or a meter. And so the square wave is basically, you've got exactly the same over a period of time. It's obviously not as long as a second, but it would be 1 second of the higher voltage and 1 second of the lower voltage, but obviously a lot faster than that. And then if you play with that, that's your pulse width. So the pulse is how much you get of a high voltage, and that pulse width can cause all sorts of fun. So we'll turn this now. Turn that down a little bit, I think it's a bit loud. So that is pretty much a square wave. And if you ever hear about people talking about pulse width modulation, it's basically this. And you see, sometimes, because I've turned this knob, which is the pulse width, all too far to the right, there's actually no, or so little, of the high voltage that we just can't hear it anymore. If we go the other way, it's a bit more musical, a bit more useful. So that's more of the high pitch. So the oscillator's staying on a higher pitch, basically. It's slightly more complicated than that, but it covers it for this purposes. Okay, so I'll turn that down a bit. So that's getting the bass oscillator. Obviously that's not very useful for us musically, because it just makes that pitch all the time. So what we need to do is put it through a VCA. I'll unplug it for a moment and I'll plug it into a VCA. I'll just use the sawtooth because we don't need to mess with the waveforms anymore now. Okay, so that's the sawtooth going into VCA 1 of the 4 on this module. We only need 1 for this voice. Right? So that's plugged in. Oh, and we're just getting a seepage of noise, which really it shouldn't do, and there must be a reason for that. Right. Yeah, not quite sure how it's doing that. Okay, but we've got a seepage of noise, but that's all right. It doesn't affect what we're doing. So now, obviously, if you assume it was being silent, oh, I know how to get it being silent, but anyway, to get it being silent, and let's plug that in there. There you go. See, I've shut it up now. So what we need is the gate from the keyboard, because I'm going to play this from a keyboard. Okay. So what I've done, you remember I said I'd put the MIDI is coming into the onto the bus behind the modules. So when I press a key now, the VCA should open, and that means the oscillator noise can get through. And it's not. Okay. Bloody marvellous. Let's try that one just in case it's that. Oh, sorry about that. What had actually happened was the VCA module wasn't actually plugged in the back properly. There's a little socket on the back to plug it onto the bus wire behind the modules, and it wasn't in properly. This is why you do screw things together and do things properly for videos. Anyway, so to demonstrate this now, and you can see one of the useful things is just here. Hopefully it'll show up on the video. I think it might be beautifully behind the cable. Yeah, there you go. That red light is on the master unit, so this, as I say, this is where the MIDI and the power comes from. So when I press the key, that red light's lighting up and we're getting a noise. And I've taken what I did. I'll just check, because I'll put it into this one. Yeah, it's working. It's working fine now. So yeah, I think it must. Like I say, but I think I hadn't put the plug in the back of the 4 VCA module properly. So all that's happening now is when I press a key, basically the VCA, what an amplifier does is, as you saw, it makes no noise when there's no signal coming in on its CV input. So the oscillator is going into the VCA, and then you need something to tell it to open the VCA to send the signal out to my studio. And I'm using the keyboard to do that. So every time I press the key, that's going through. We can use other things. So I plug that lead in there. We use an LFO. And you can see now, every time the LFO pulses on, or high voltage is high, we use a slow one. And you see the slow one, so it's actually, it doesn't have to be a pulse. What you're telling you, basically, it's how much the VCA is open, and this is what this demonstrates. So this oscillator is opening, this low frequency oscillator. So it's just the same as a regular oscillator, but it's not in our hearing range. That's why it's low frequency. And so what's happening now is you're getting a slow sine wave in effect that's rising up, opening the VCA, so the sound goes out and then slides back down again. And if I turn that up, okay. If you want it to really tell what it's doing, turn it right down. So you can see as the light's going out, the voltage is dropping, it's closing the VCA, and as the voltage rises, the light comes back on, it's opening the VCA. excuse me. And so it's excuse me. So when so it's opening the VCA. So the gate from the keyboard is very much an on-off, but that's not actually very helpful for us musically. So what we actually want to do is use an envelope. So there's two main sorts of envelope. You can see the one that's most common and is on 99% of synthesizers, you can just about see it there, is ADSR. That's the attack, decay, sustain, release. And we'll talk more about what those individual things are later. Sorry, but what I'm going to use first is this 2 envelope module, and what this has got is just an AR envelope. So this is just attack and release. So I'll move my gate signal from the keyboard into the envelope module. And what an envelope does, it lets you change the trigger, the keyboard, into something different. So I'm pressing the keyboard. You can see the lights coming on over here. Just checking you can't see that, but you can see it's taking its time. So I'm using this top envelope here because there's 2 envelopes in this module. So if I turn the attack up, see, so basically attack is how quickly the sound starts, and then release is the opposite, it's how quickly the sound fades. Okay, so it's as simple as that. And so now I'll just turn those both down a bit so it's fairly quick. You can see when you do a new pulse that it does reset the envelope. Okay, and that on some synthesizers and on some more complicated modules in the AE, you can alter that behavior. But that's a thing for another day. So basic attack release envelope. It doesn't matter how you hold it. I'm holding the key down. You see the light's still on, but it's just going to do that one thing. It's going to do the attack and do the release. And if you do a quick thing, it does the same thing whether you hold the key down. Right. And this is where the ADSR envelope comes in. Okay, which we'll now switch to. So I'll do this right. So move the gate into the ADSR envelope. I might need a longer wire for this bit. Might get away with it. Alright. It would be easier if the modules didn't move around. Right, so same thing. You can see I'm getting the pulse. This is one of the things I like. One of the things I don't like about the VCA, it would actually be quite nice if it had a light in it, but none of the modules do, and very few synthesizers do, because of course now I'm using an envelope. You can see what I'm getting from the red light on there. But it'd be nice sometimes, I think, if the VCA itself had a little light on to tell us it was activated or what level it was at. But it's also good to use your ears as well. So there you go. Right, so exactly the same. We'll just turn that down a second. So if I turn sustain and decay right down, and I'll tell you what they are in a moment. So I've got attack as short as it will be, and I'm going to turn the release up. So same thing. Sorry, I'll tell you why. I won't tell you why it's done that, but what I'll do is I'll turn the decay up instead. Here we go. So it's exactly the same as the attack and release on the other one. So if I turn that down, I'm going to turn the decay back up again. But it's still got the same thing. If I hold the key down, it doesn't stay on. So this is where sustain comes in. So let's turn the sustain up. So I turn the sustain up to full. Sustain. So now, as long as I hold the key, you can see the red lights on. Hopefully you can. Yeah, you can see the red lights on. The red lights on the ADSR as well. So the sustain is on. And if I turn the sustain knob, won't do it. No, it doesn't do it while it's actually running. Okay, right. So some synths it does, and some synths it doesn't. You can tell I didn't practice for this video. So what we've got there, I'll let that go now. So basically that's exactly the same as the attack and release, but now if you hold the key, you've told it to sustain it at a certain level. So see, so I turn it down. It works now if I turn it down. I think what it might have done it before is because I had the decay so high, which I'll now tell you what decay is. So this is the different. This is what decay is as opposed to release. So you get the initial attack, so how quickly the volume rises. Then you get a decay. So what that is the volume will go back down again, and again at the speed you tell it to. Now, if I turn the sustain up to full volume, the decay won't actually really do anything, because basically the attack's going up to full volume, and then you've not told it to go back down again because you want to keep the full volume. So if I turn the sustain knob down, so we're now telling it to be quieter. We'll put the decay about middle. So what you should hear now is it'll rise and get loud, and then it'll quieten down a bit slower. I'll just turn the decay up to make that clearer. Okay, so that's what decay is doing. The reason it was actually the decay was being the release before is because I had no sustain on at all. So if I turn the decay to sustain down a bit more, if I turn the volume up on this, it might help. Okay, so sustain level is how loud you want the sound to be. It's very useful, and it's common with just about all acoustic sounds that the initial attack, the initial stroke of the bow, the initial pluck on the guitar string or whatever will be louder and the sustain is quieter. Of course, with synthesizers you don't have to stick to that, but that's a time for another story for another day. Okay, so then the release becomes after whatever you want to descend from the sustain level. So if you have no sustain, you've in effect only got attack and release, which happens to be decay. Okay, on an ADSR. I'm sorry I'm confusing you here. So basically, if in this situation I've got attack and release because there's no sustain, and then I've got attack and decay is being the same as release because I've turned the sustain down. But as soon as I turn the sustain up, the release becomes active again. Okay, so if I turn the sustain right up, I'll turn the decay off because now it's not really doing anything anyway. So, okay, and that fade away from the sustain level is controlled by the release. Okay, and the reason that release knob works there is because I've turned the sustain. If I do a half thing, I'll turn the decay up. So you have that initial surge of louder sound. This is the sustain level, and if I turn the sustain release up, it takes a little while to fade away, and that's what's controlling the volume now via the 4 VCA. So you don't use the envelope itself. It actually has to supply the control voltage to the amplifier. The amplifier is what actually controls the volume. And like I say, you could use other things. Okay, so this is a more interesting thing already. We'll turn that back up again. Ooh. Oh yeah, don't have to do that yet. So obviously we've still got to control the pitch. So as I say, MIDI is on this already. I've got the keyboard attached. So I now need wherever the bus voltage is, bus CV, there we go. Bus CV, and we'll put that into the oscillator. Oh, that's a bit. So if I lower the oscillator, there we go. Okay, so what I've just done is the MIDI note information that comes into the master module is converted to a CV between 0 and 5 volts because this is the AE Modular, and all I've done is I've put that straight in. In fact, I'll swap that wire. I'll use a little one. Sorry, I have to concentrate while I'm doing this. But mostly because the modules keep moving. I'm beginning to think I should have screwed them in. So now the lowest notes will be near 0 volts. And then up to about 5 volts will be here somewhere. Now, of course, what you'll notice there is that, yes, I'm playing it on a keyboard, but I still have got control of the pitch over here by the coarse and fine frequencies. And this is where I think scales and things don't really apply to synthesizers. I know there'll be purists that disagree with me, but I'm holding the same note on my keyboard. So what you do keep, obviously, though, is the relationship between the different pitches on your keyboard. There are ways to play with that, and obviously some keyboards can do microtonal, but that doesn't translate over MIDI very well. But there are things you can do within the AE Modular that mess with that, and there are some keyboards, of course, where you can do stuff internal to the keyboard, where you can change scales on the keyboard. Okay. But for your purposes, learning about synthesis, all you need to remember is what you ought to do, if you're going to do this with other instruments, is you need to tune the oscillator to the other instrument, or the other instrument to the oscillator, whichever way around you prefer. I don't means you need to get a tune around. I mean, just so it sounds all right to your ears. So it could even be, it's a harmonic of it. So a lot of notes are related, and this is what scales are, is how notes sound together, really, I suppose, the best way of doing it. And it very much depends on your synth sound, which is, again, another reason I don't like scales and stuff for synths, because the sound a synthesizer makes such a difference to what sounds good when you're playing it, especially with chords and things. Okay, so we can only play one note at a time, okay? So this is what you would call a monosynth. So if you hear a monophonic synthesizer or a monosynth, it means it only plays one note at a time. And I say only advisedly, because usually monophonic synths gives you the most ability to change the sound, mess with the sound, do stuff to it. The more interesting. Conversely, obviously, that means they don't play chords, and if you had more than one of them, you could play chords with them. But if you use a more complex sound, it doesn't tend to make very good chords as a rule. There's always exceptions. I mean, strings, real strings, and synthesized strings as well, are actually quite complex harmonically, and so they tend to have quite full sounds, but they still work quite well as chords, or very well as chords, I should say. That's why an orchestra sounds like it does, really. So, what am I trying to tell you? Well, use your ears, I suppose, whatever you're doing with the music, really. Again, one of the things I love about things like using the AE Modular is yes, there's visual in front of you, but you have to listen to what it's doing to your sound to use it well. It's not like being on a computer where you tend to start looking at the screen and focusing on, is it lined up on timing or whatever else. You are very much doing it yourself. And this is part of the reason it's really analog. Anyway, we're ready to move on, hopefully. I hope you're okay. There is, obviously, you've got that variation within the oscillator sound, but you can't do anything else to it. And this is where the filter comes in. So we'll switch to going through the filter. Bear with me a moment. It's a bit fiddly. Definitely should have screwed the modules in, that's all I can say. And what I didn't do, just bear with me a moment. I'll tell you what I'm doing in a minute. Should have done that ready before I started this, but there you go. So there we go. It sounds just the same as it did before. I'll turn that frequency down a bit. Okay, so what a filter does is it cuts out some of the spectrum, the noise spectrum or sound spectrum. So a low pass filter lets the lower frequencies, lower than its cutoff point. Its cutoff point is obviously the point in the frequency that you've selected via the knobs or other reasons, like you can put CVs in and so on. And so the cutoff point is the frequency where below the sound is allowed to pass through and above it's cut. Okay. Now, no frequency on the planet is black and white. Literally at that frequency, let's say it's middle C or whatever, that every frequency above that is gone and every frequency below that stays in a low pass filter. They have different ratings. You get, and the most common one is 24 decibels, 24 dB, and that means that it lowers the sound by 24 decibels over the next octaves going up, or the frequencies going up. So it cuts it off fairly sharply, but not absolutely perfectly. And then you can get a softer one. So this 12 is quite common, a 12 decibel filter. And that means obviously it's half of the 24 decibel. It might be more complicated than that, but essentially treat it as half. And so it doesn't cut the frequencies above in a low pass filter, the cutoff point, quite as much. So it gives you a brighter sound, because the higher frequencies are what make the brighter, sharper sounds. Okay, so we're in the low pass filter here. So the best thing to do is, rather than me rabbit on about it, is I'll show you. So I'll hold the key down. Oh, sorry, what did I do there? Did something. Oh, it's alright. It's alright. I rested my elbow on the Akai MPC that's controlling the MIDI. So I've got the oscillators coming into this filter module, and I've picked this one on purpose, which I'll tell you why in a minute. And so this here is the cutoff, the one that says frequency. This is the cutoff. So as I turn it down, it'll start knocking the top end off. Right, so the higher pitches are going, and the lower sound is still coming through. I'll just turn the sound up a bit. Okay, and I can turn it all the way so it's actually just shut everything off. Turn it back up again. Good job, I put a volume thing at the side of me. Right, okay, so that's a basic low pass filter. There's one other control that's interesting, and I'll let go of that for a moment. The other thing is filters, usually it's called resonance. I have come across other names for it, but normally it's called resonance. And what that is it emphasizes the frequencies around the cutoff point. So, and this is where, and some filters can even do what they call self-oscillate, i.e. they'll make their own noise. They don't need an oscillator. They will actually make their own noise, which can be quite fun. It's quite useful for kick drums, low down, and that sort of thing. So let me do this again. So I'll turn the resonance up this time. I'll turn it about halfway, maybe a little bit higher. Now I'll turn the same knob again. So I'm turning so I'll get, that's quite a good point. So now I'll turn the resonance up. And now if I now move the cutoff knob, and it's timed, it almost sounds like a vowel sound when you're speaking, and that is precisely because that's how we make vowel sounds. Our mouth is being a filter for the resonance, the oscillator, if you like, of our throat. Excuse me. So basically all that is emphasising the frequency around the point you've selected with this. In this case with this knob. Like I say, you could then be adjusting that with an envelope. You could be adjusting it with an LFO. So it doesn't have to be static. But even straight off the bat now, you could play it while you're playing the keyboard. But you could put an envelope into it. Why don't we do that just for the hell of it, really? So I need the same trigger, otherwise it won't work. So I'm now going to trigger another envelope. So I'm going from, because the MIDI, the gate from the keyboard is on the bus on the modular, which is one of the reasons I picked to do this video with it, because it's nice and graphic and straightforward. So I've now got I'm just going to check. Yeah. See. So now when I press the key, this I've got two envelopes triggering now. So this envelope, I've run out of my little wires, so I'm going to use a big one. There are more little wires, but right. So I'll put this into CV1. I'll just make it so it uses it. So I'll turn. So what I want to actually tell you, I'll turn that back down again. Sorry, bear with me a second. So right. So that's the sound with none of this. Not this envelope isn't doing anything. If I turn this knob up. And we're really starting to get a much more interesting sound now. So what's happening there is this envelope is basically turning that knob for me when I press the key, and then it turns it. So I'm going to make it so it opens it right away, really fast. But I'll turn the decay up a bit so it fades out a bit slower. Okay, so if I turn the attack up, so it'll come in slower, and then I'll turn the decay or release down. Now you see already you've got some interaction there because if I hold the key down, you get the full fade out. If I stab the key, it's more interesting. And this is again one of the fun things of synthesizers is how the sound interacts with how you play. One of the things I like to do is you can actually have it on an ADSR envelope, so that if you hold the key down, the sound is shorter than if you hold the key, which will be a thing for another video. But so there's lots of stuff you can start to do there. So that is what most analog synthesizer voices are. You've got VCO into a filter, into a VCA, and then you've got envelopes and usually an LFO to mess things up as well. Obviously, the very cheap ones these days have one, but most synths these days have two oscillators, and that brings in another realm of things which I won't cover in this video. There was a couple more things I meant to do earlier. Sorry, I just remembered one of them. One of the things with an LFO, so this might be able to demonstrate now, but we'll give it a go. See what happens. So what I'm doing, I've plugged the LFO into the oscillator. So basically, which one are we reading? Sorry, I've mixed the slow one, so I'll just turn it up a bit. Because one of the things I love about the 2FLO module in Tangible Waves is you've got a slow and fast switch, and you can do different things with the different oscillators. And you can see I've got this one's on slow and it's going really, really slowly, and this one's on fast and it's going really, really quickly. Right. So what you've got there, you can see is the oscillators going up and down, the frequency is going up and down because I've told it to. Now that is vibrato. Obviously, you'd normally do it faster, or when you hear it in music, it's normally faster, which we can now demonstrate. Just bear with me a second. I'll use the fast one. I will make it less strong. Okay, so that wasn't obviously demonstrating very musical vibrato, but it was. It showed you how to set about doing it, and I didn't intend it to get too complicated on that front, because what I really wanted to talk to you about before we finish is the different sorts of filter. I said, I'd say 80% plus of filters on synthesizers are low pass filters, so they cut off the top frequencies. But you can have next most common is probably high pass. So that's the opposite thing. It stops the lower frequencies and or reduces them, and lets the higher frequencies below the cutoff point through. And we can demonstrate that. I'm just going to disconnect the this envelope because it'll confuse the issue. All right, so to use, this is why I use this particular module, because this has got the other sorts of filters in it. So this is a high pass filter. I'll turn the resonance down. So you see, so it's the other way around. When I turn it down, it's cut everything off, as opposed to the other one that was letting everything through. And then the resonance, ultimately do the same thing, emphasising the frequencies around the cutoff point. Okay, so that whistling is actually where the resonance starts to cause the self-oscillation in the filter. Okay, and then so that means the oscillator can make its own noise. You don't actually need an input. So you sometimes might need an input to set it off. It depends on the synthesizer model. Right, and then the last sort of filter is a bandpass filter. And that's, as you might expect, lets a band of frequencies through. And what that means is you've in effect got two cutoff points. So we can let through, it will let through between two frequencies. So with a high pass, you're cutting off everything below, and then with a low pass, you're cutting off everything above. So obviously what a band pass is those two filters together. So let me turn the band pass filter up. So now what we'll do is we won't get all of the frequencies at the top or the bottom. So let's see what happens. So I'll turn the bar sound up a bit. So you see, if I turn the cutoff frequency, we're moving through an area. If I turn the resonance up, same thing. So the resonance still is emphasising frequencies around the cutoff point. Now, in this bandpass filter is set. Those two cutoff points for the low pass and the high pass filter, you can't alter the difference between them. On some synthesizers, you can actually change them, so that you can let more. The band in effect of frequencies you let through is smaller or bigger. It's set on this one. So, as I say, all the bandpass filter is, you've got a low pass filter, and it's saying, okay, you can have the frequencies below here, but then the high pass filter gets that signal and says, right, but you can't have the frequencies below here. You can only have the ones above here. And the difference between those two cutoff points for those two filters is the sound that actually gets through, which is why it tends to get more nasally and what sounds nasally to us. And usually, it's not a very powerful sound because you've chopped all the bottom end, the bass off. So. So this is no resonance at all. So see here we've got no top end at all hardly, because the low pass filter has chopped it all off. And conversely, up here we've got next to no bottom end because the high pass filter's chopped it all off. So that band pass filters are needed if you want to do vocal sounds and that sort of thing, because again, our mouth and our nose and are what shape the sound. So they're the filter system for the oscillator of our throat. That's the best way I can think of putting it. Oh, and don't forget your tongue as well. The tongue has an important role as well. So that's why a relatively simple filter can't mimic vowel sounds. But of course, what you can do, as I was demonstrating a little bit with the envelopes, is then you as soon as you start putting more control voltages in, things that alter the sound while you're playing, it can sound more complex and more vocals if you want to get that way. I hope that was clear. Like I say, the key one to understand is low pass, because that's what you're going to use in 90% of sounds, and it's particularly useful for bass sounds, because you don't want the top end on bass sounds, because all it does is muddy the mix when you come to mix it with other, when you come to put it with other sounds. And that's it for this video. My intention is that I'll do a series of videos that will gradually get more complicated. So the next one I'm thinking would be I'll actually introduce other ways of controlling the pitch other than a keyboard, which in modular world means really your analog sequences. There are other things. There's the slew edge, which is on the corner of the module. I want to talk about what that does, because that's quite in music. And then the other thing, going back to scales, is the quantizer, is quantizing. So to finish this video, I've taken all the cables out, as you can see. That was very much the basics. Like I say, we'll talk about the slew edge, the quantizer, and analog sequencers next time. If you'd like me to do something about putting a second oscillator in and noise, because that's what it really, a full synth voice, a good synthesizer will have 2 oscillators as the minimum and a noise source, and then your mixer to mix those things together. And if you'd like me to discuss that more, please let me know in the comments, or you can always message me as well. And a future video, what I want to do is look at different sorts of filters. Sorry, not different sorts of filters, the different filters within the AE Modular. We've got, I think it's about 7 now, 7 different filters, and there's at least 1 more brewing from a third-party manufacturer. And why do you need more than 1 sort of filter? And I think the best way to explain that is to actually just show you. I mean, and you can listen to it and hear the differences and so on. Anyway, so if you've got any thoughts where you'd like this series to go, please do put them in the comments. It'd be most helpful, because I've got some ideas, but this is very much an experiment, really. And appreciate you watching. Thanks. Bye.